Warning, the following video contains major plot spoilers for Pokémon Black and White and Pokémon Black and White 2. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hey Pokemon fans, Tamashii here, and today I'm going to be tackling a subject a bit deeper than my usual fare, the ethics of Pokemon. It's been a controversial topic for a long time, and many of you have asked me what I have to say about it. So today I'm going to share with you my personal thoughts and feelings on the matter. Keep in mind that this video is not meant to be an end-all be-all. It's just my own personal thoughts on the ethics of Pokemon. And I'm not speaking for anybody but myself. Remember, this video is not meant to be an attack on Pokemon as a franchise, nor its fans. If you've seen any of my videos before, you'll know I'm probably one of the biggest Pokemon fans on the planet. But because Pokemon is such a big part of my life, I feel like it deserves some deep thought and consideration, which in this case means critical analysis. It is possible to love something and still be critical of it. First, I think it's best to sort out where the actual ethical issues lie in Pokemon's mechanics. Battling is what most people take issue with, because the thought of having creatures that resemble animals fighting one another at the command of humans is akin to cockfighting in the real world, a very cruel, inhumane activity. However, Pokemon aren't quite animals, they're monsters. Some have IQs higher than the humans that command them, and most of them appear to understand humans' thoughts and feelings, something animals can't usually do. Pokemon aren't forced to battle in an arena they don't understand, but instead, actual battles play out more like supernatural boxing. The Pokemon fight to the knockout, and then no more. The only times the battles are fought as anything other than a competitive sport are when the players come up against an evil team and must fight them to save the world. So instead of thinking of Pokemon battles as cockfighting, we should think of them more like martial arts. A real-life karate champion fights as a sport, but can still use those skills outside of tournaments to protect other people. Yes, the parallel can still be drawn to cockfighting, and it is still a questionable thing to show in media for children, but nevertheless, in-universe, the battling aspect itself is not the problem. Instead, I think the issue arises from the mechanic of capture in Pokemon, and whether or not the Pokemon are capable of consenting to the battles that they end up fighting in. In the early games, how Pokeballs work is left very ambiguous. You could theorize that the Pokemon choose which trainers get to capture them, and only decide to be captured when the trainer earns their respect by battling them. And it could have been no less valid than theorizing that Pokemon were beaten into submission and captured against their will. We didn't know what the living conditions inside Pokeballs were like. If they were filled with spikes and lava, if the Pokemon were cramped in there, if they were shrunken down or put into suspended animation, or if there were secretly little luxury apartments inside for the Pokemon to live in. When Pokemon were traded to another game, they wouldn't obey their trainers unless they had enough gym badges. Possibly because they wouldn't respect the trainer unless they were good enough to have earned them, or possibly it was for some other reason. Aside from the fact that the Pokemon were still affected by poison while inside their Pokeballs, there just wasn't a lot of information about the origins and inner working of various things in the Pokemon universe, and it was left mostly to the imagination. The anime universe, while it doesn't necessarily follow the same rules as the game universe, is still an interpretation of those rules, so it's worth taking a look at as well. In the anime, there are circumstances in which Pokemon do not want to be captured, and Ash and his friends learn to consider what's best for the Pokemon rather than selfishly capturing every single one. Take for example the Oddish in the episode Bulbasaur in the Hidden Village. Ash and Misty both try to capture it at first, but then learn that the area that they're in is a Pokemon sanctuary, so they apologize to the Oddish and let it stay wild. In many cases, Ash doesn't weaken or battle with the Pokemon that join him. He simply befriends them and they agree to come along, and willingly jump into the Pokeballs. Bulbasaur actually wants to battle Ash before agreeing to join his party, as a test of Ash's skill. In some cases, they don't even need to be captured in the balls at all, like Haunter. The Pokeballs themselves seem to have kind of flexible technology, in that the way they work changes depending on the scene and context. But it definitely seems to be true that if the Pokemon doesn't like being inside the ball, like Pikachu, they're able to free themselves and resist being called back. The actual battling is never very intense, and it's meant to play out like a sport rather than a violent struggle. When Pokemon do get hurt, it's in a cartoony manner, where they never sustain any real injury. This is in sharp contrast to the way battles are portrayed in Pokemon Origins, where they get incredibly violent and Pokemon scream and writhe in pain. Getting back to the games though, things got a lot less vague in the 5th generation, where we were able to learn more about Pokeballs and their effect on Pokemon. Here they were painted as mind control devices. According to Drayden, there was a time before Pokeballs were invented, where Pokemon and humans would still fight side by side, but Pokemon had more of a say in it. They could run away if their trainer was unskilled or didn't treat them well. When Pokeballs were invented, Pokemon lost this freedom. When a Pokemon is captured in a Pokeball, something in its brain is rewired to obey its trainers, as illustrated in Black and White 2. The rival character Hugh is in search of his sister's Purloin, which was captured by Team Plasma. When he finally finds it, however, this Pokemon, that was presumably a part of their family for a long time, doesn't even recognize Hugh anymore, and it does not want him to rescue it. In fact, it's flat out hostile towards him. Being captured by Team Plasma completely changed the way this Pokemon felt about a person that was presumably once very close to it. This incident implies that Pokemon are completely controlled by their Poké Balls, and don't really have a say in whether or not they fight. They're completely trapped and at the mercy of their trainers. When N releases his Pokemon, he notes that they seem sad. This could imply that the Pokemon want to stay by the trainer's side, but if Pokeballs are capable of forcing a Pokemon to become loyal to its captor, it could also be a side effect of the brainwashing or Stockholm Syndrome. Badges, which once could be thought of as symbols of respect, are now portrayed as amplifiers of a Pokeball's brainwashing power. It's interesting that the game itself paints such an unpleasant picture of life as a captured Pokemon, bringing up one of the series' greatest criticisms from day one, and then not even making an effort to frame this in any way to make this act seem less than humane. In Black and White 1, Team Plasma's goal is to liberate Pokemon from their trainers and Pokeballs, and allow them true freedom. However, the entire question of whether or not it's humane to keep Pokemon in Pokeballs is completely dropped, once you find out that Team Plasma has ulterior motives. Ghetsis is set up as a straw man, and his points lose credibility. You are never given a clear answer as to whether or not Pokemon are better off without people, but instead the case is dismissed because, oops, Team Plasma is evil after all. That sure makes it easy to discredit what they had to say. The game basically poses an argument against its own morality and then doesn't defend itself. Instead, everything is left ambiguous. Black and White 2, rather than continuing the plot and leaving things less vague, starts an entirely different one, and adds very little to the conversation aside from the incident with Hugh's Liepard. It's no surprise that recently, PETA saw this as an invitation to attack the series with its Pokemon Black and Blue parody Flash game, which forced Pokemon fans to confront this aspect of the series and compelled many to want to defend it. I'll admit, even my knee-jerk reaction was, how dare they? But honestly, when you really think about it, it's difficult to defend Pokemon on any grounds other than it's just a game, so who cares? While this is true, it is just a game and no real creatures are being harmed here, media has a huge impact on the way society sees certain issues, and it's hard not to see the similarities between Pokemon and real-life animals. There's also no reason developers can't impart meaning into games just because their stories are fictional and their gameplay is meant to be fun. A lot of good games are fun and also make you think. Pokemon is one such game, so let's dignify it with a bit more thought than that. To uncover the roots of this ethical dilemma, let's go back to where the concept of Pokemon originated. Satoshi Tajiri, the creator of Pokemon, drew inspiration for the series from many places, including his own childhood love of catching and studying bugs, and his own interest in other video games. Particularly, around the time Pokemon as a concept was conceived, he and Ken Sugimori were both playing Dragon Quest III for the SNES. In this game, you can earn different pieces of equipment to boost your character's stats, and Sugimori found more than one extremely rare hat in his copy of the game. Satoshi Tajiri wanted one, but since their games were on different cartridges, there was no way Sugimori could transfer it to Tajiri's game file. When the Nintendo Game Boy was released and the link cable was introduced, he saw it as a way of utilizing such a mechanic, where players could trade coveted items between games. When he was building a game based around this concept, he had to come up with a commodity that players would want, to the extent that they would go to the effort of trading for it. He thought back to his childhood hobbies as well, and recalled catching bugs. The idea for capturing and exchanging creatures was born, and this is the basis for Pokemon. Additionally, animals and other cute things trigger our maternal instincts. We see them and simultaneously want to care for them and also want to own them. Pokemon were designed to look like animals to make people want them the same way people want pets. Cute things that we can care for as well as we can claim ownership of. Hello Kitty, another popular franchise from Japan, utilizes this concept quite well. However, when this concept was initially thought up, they probably didn't consider the possible inhumane implications it may have. It was designed from a commodity standpoint, where things of value to the players would be exchanged, not living sentient beings. A logical combination of the monsters as party member mechanics and the usual battling system from RPGs meant that these commoditized creatures would be fighting on our behalf. Other monster RPGs dodge this ethical bullet by having you persuade other monsters to join you, instead of forcibly capturing them. Pokemon's gimmick is the Poké Ball, which is the real source of this moral controversy. Given the origins of Pokemon's concept, Poké Balls make sense. Satoshi's fascination was not only with studying the many different types of bugs, which manifested itself in the Pokédex, but also finding different innovative methods of capturing them. A gimmick like the gacha-like Pokéball was a fantastical and unique way of implementing this into the game as a mechanic. While the first games were vague enough for this not to necessarily be an inhumane concept at the time, monster balls are painted in an increasingly horrifying light in the newer games, forcing fans and critics alike to re-examine this issue. Which brings me back to the initial question, is Pokémon ethical? I'm starting to think that there is no simple answer. From every angle you look at it, forcibly capturing a creature from its own habitat and forcing it to fight other creatures at the risk of harming itself and others is inhumane. But I don't think that there was any malicious intent when this system was designed, and I don't think it has any negative ramifications on the people who play and enjoy these games. Most people who consider themselves Pokemon fans think of their Pokemon as their friends, not as tools for fighting or a means to an end. And the Pokemon fandom has brought a lot of people together and done a lot of good in many people's lives. And I certainly don't think that Pokemon intentionally teaches children that cockfighting is okay. The most prominent message throughout the games and the show is teamwork and friendship, not violence. Well, aside from Origins anyway. Still though, I don't think I can say that the Pokemon universe is completely morally just. And whether or not Game Freak addresses this issue within games again, and leaves us with a more concrete answer, we'll have to tell whether it'll ever be resolved for certain. X and Y seem to go a completely different direction plot-wise, and while it may bring up different ethical issues, how Pokeballs work is not expanded on. So in the meantime, how do we as Pokemon fans reconcile the fact that the franchise that we love might not be ethical? Well, we can make sure that Pokemon is doing some good in the world by learning from it. The good parts along with the bad. I think in the anime, though Ash certainly has his flaws, he embodies what all trainers ought to aspire to be. He truly cares about his Pokemon. He will surrender a battle to keep his Pokemon from getting hurt if he feels they're suffering, and he will release his Pokemon if it will make them happier than fighting for him. While there are still problems with the concept of Pokemon at its core, we can all try our best to be the best trainers we can be and treat Pokemon kindly. The show, and the games to some extent, try and teach kids to be kind to their partners and companions, whether they be human friends or animals. And all of its downfalls, the ambiguous morality, the possibility of children imitating the violence, these are things that we can learn from too. It can start up a discussion from parent to child about how to treat animals kindly. It can open up a dialogue that might have passed that family by otherwise. And honestly, even though 5th Gen left us with plenty of evidence that point towards Pokeballs being unethical, there's still room for fans to argue against it. After all, Drayden himself might not be a Pokeball expert. He might just be saying these things out of fear of this new technology he might not fully understand. In the Johto region, Kurt makes Pokeballs out of apricorns, which makes Pokeballs seem more like hollowed-out fruit than high-tech brainwashing machines, and it is possible for Pokemon to dislike their trainer even after being captured, as evidenced by moves like frustration. So even within the Pokemon universe, there is some contradiction and dispute over the way Pokeballs work. It's definitely worth considering that there are many ways to look at this issue, and that there's room for interpretation. So whether you see Pokemon as ethical or not, I think the worst thing we can do as Pokemon fans is continue to sweep the issue under the rug. The more we talk about it, the more we can learn from it. And I feel like everybody gets more out of it that way. How do you feel about the ethics of Pokemon? Leave me a comment and let me know. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to click here to subscribe for more Pokemon videos. See ya!